We are recording. Okay. So welcome to It's All Speechy. It's Natalie here, and I have Ish from Australia. We are now moving out of the US and going to learn some really great tips about SLP burnout, which I think is a huge, huge topic for everybody and anybody right now in our field, especially following COVID. Welcome, Ish.
Thanks, Natalie, for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, it's very weird you being like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed in the morning, and I'm like, what am I having for supper? Like, ready to get my comfy clothes on.
But it's amazing, isn't it, now with especially after, because of COVID, we're so used to connecting with people around the world so easily as well, right?
Yeah.
Like managing time zones and everything, it's just so much easier. We're so much more connected, which is amazing.
It is. You get to learn so many more things. And yeah, I've definitely gotten a lot better at time zones. I'm not questioning anymore. Like, okay, how far is this person? I'm like, I nailed it. All right. So Ish, to start us off, just kind of tell us who you are, what you're doing, kind of what got you to where you're at now.
Sure. So I graduated a long time ago, back in 2000. And so I'm a speechy based in Australia, in Western Australia. And when I graduated back in 2000, my first job was working in public health and in early intervention. And I really loved that job because it got me really exposed to working with kiddos with CAS and also doing lots and lots of parent coaching. But what I also really loved about that job was how much support that I got in that first job out of uni, because you leave uni, right, without, you've got all of this information, but then applying it into the real world can become really, really tricky. And I had this beautiful speechy who mentored me, particularly in CAS, and I just remember feeling that not being able to support this caseload and moving through that with her and just getting all of the skills that I needed to be able to support my kiddos so much better, to know how to problem solve, to be able to know what the little tips and the hacks and the strategies were to be able to support those kiddos to get the goals that achieved that we had for them. So, and to also just see, how happy the parents were as well, because we were achieving those goals. So that made a huge impact for me. And also in my second job, I was really lucky to be mentored in that job as well, because I was so in that job, it was in education, and it was with a caseload of children with DLD, essentially, here in WA. And so with that caseload, I was the founding speech pathologist at the school. So I was setting up all the programs, I was teaching all of the teachers and the EAs. So it was really exciting. But at the same time, there was still so much that I didn't know. It was my second job in my career. So again, just getting that mentoring and support was absolutely massive for me. So throughout my journey, I've always been in pediatrics and then in private practice. And I suppose when I was in my private practice, that was where I really got to really establish a lot of my skills and feel really confident in the areas that I was working with. And then once I started hiring particularly early career speech pathologists, I was able to do a lot more mentoring with them, and that's what's got me into the mentoring space as well. So I'm a pediatric clinician, and I also mentor and support early career speechies. So that's who I am.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think it's so fun, like going in, like I kind of gotten that bug too. I'm like, I want to mentor. Like I want to make connections with all these people coming in, because there's so much to learn. Like you graduate and like you think you have it all down pat, and then you show up to your first day at work and you're like, no. Throw the notes out the window. Like, I mean, school beneficial. It was needed. But like you learn so much more once you're out in the field. And for you to start developing like a school program too, like that's insane.
That's exactly it. And I just, you just don't know what you don't know. And you don't know what you don't know until you're right in the middle of it. Yeah. And I think that's where you can learn as much as you can through your university degree, and you can
Mm-hmm.
learn as much as you can in your pracs, but then you're in the reality of working with clients, working with other staff members, and that's when I think
Yeah.
we all go into the imposter syndrome, because we're like, oh my God, I don't know, and they're expecting me to know. I'm the person in the room that has to know everything about this topic, right?
Oh yeah, I have real bad imposter syndrome. I'm like, are you sure? Like, I should be the one. And I was like, no, you got it. Like, keep it up. Like,
Yeah,
but it's
yeah,
hard.
and
It's
I
a
think
real thing.
it really is a real thing, isn't it? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that the first part of this is just understanding that it's a real thing. Like, we come out with a degree, but we don't know everything. And we're
Mm-hmm.
not supposed to know everything. And I think, and I don't know what it's like in the US, but I think in Australia, when we're a student and we're going through our pracs, we have to feel like we know everything, because we're trying to impress
Mm-hmm.
our supervisor, and we're trying to pass our pracs, and we've got to write these
Yeah.
lengthy session plans, and we've got to research everything. And then you go into the workforce and you don't have that sort of time. You
No.
just don't. Like, you've got a caseload, and you've got meetings to go to, and other things
Yes.
that are pulling at you, and you just got to be able to be super flexible, and you've got to be able to learn on the job and learn on the fly. But if you're not supported in doing that, then how do you do that successfully without spending all of your weeknights and weekends making resources and doing all the research and looking up all the things and buying all the books and all the courses, and feeling exhausted at the end of it as well?
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah, I remember sitting like in graduate school, and I'd have like my supervisors, and like they would sit and be like, oh, like let's like improve I mean, obviously, like report writing, but like also your data taking, and like do this and this and this. And like nowadays, it's like, how often can I sit and like actually get like use those strategies from school, where it's like now it's just kind of chicken scratch, and you're just like, okay, let's hope I can read that later. Because I mean, especially in the schools with such a high caseload too. I don't know how Australia has it laid out, but like in the US, like they have such high caseloads, like up to like 100, 110 kids for one SLP. And it's like, you can't do that. You have like 6 kids at once sometimes. Like, it's so hard.
How do you like manage it all? And I think that's the conversation that we have to start having, is like, how do we manage it all? How do we take notes when we've got 6 kids in a group, or we're pushing into a classroom, or when we've got a kiddo and we might be in a one-to-one session, but the child is roaming around the room and the parents are giving you all this information. And how do you actually record all of that? Because you finish with that kiddo and you say bye, and then you bring the next child in, so it's not like you can go, here, give me a moment while I madly do a brain dump and get all of this information down. And I don't know about you, but I don't have the best handwriting either, so sometimes I'm like, what was that I wrote?
Was that a D? No, that might have been maybe a P. Like, what? Yeah, I did a home health, like early intervention for a bit. And it's like, even some of those kids, like you'd go in with all the good intentions, and like you kind of knew you had the time too. Cause I'm like, okay, this job's parent coaching. Like, I'm just observing the kid, interacting when I can. So I can definitely take notes. But it's always those kids that like, they're wanting to come up and they're like trying to get to your pen, and you're like throwing your stuff around, like, nope, like, and then by the end, you're like, okay, no bag. I can't even bring a bag in here because it's too distracting. And you go through an hour session, and like you said, you walk out and you're like, I can't brain dump this anywhere because I have to drive to the next one. Like,
that's exactly it. I remember for a little while, I even tried to do like an audio recording. So it's like do a brain dump in an audio recording. But then I was like, when do I have time to sit down and listen to the audio recording in order to get all of this information out? So even sometimes the hacks that you're trying to use to make life runs more smoothly, particularly with data collection, doesn't always work. You think it's a great idea, and then in reality, it just isn't practical.
I had a roommate that would do that. Like in school, she would record, or like they had like the recording devices for all the sessions, and she'd go back and like listen to it all and do like the transcriptions and stuff. And I'm like, you could not do that nowadays. Like when you're seeing maybe 10, 12 kids a day, like in private practice, or you're seeing up to 20 kids in school or whatever it might be, like you can't sit and listen to a recording of everyone. Like,
No,
it's not feasible.
absolutely not. It really isn't, right? And it's the same thing with, I think, having all your resources as well. Like, you can't be going
Mm-hmm.
out and buying all the resources because you don't. That's not. I don't think the ideal use of anybody's money. And then
Yeah.
also, you're like, you can't be spending all your time creating all the resources because,
Mm-hmm.
again, I think we often get into that habit of then creating resources just for one client,
Yes.
as opposed to just collecting resources that you can use for multiple populations and multiple kiddos that you've got in your caseload. So I think that when we're going through our undergraduate program or our master's program, that we're taught to work in a way that isn't matching what reality looks like. There is such a disconnect between what happens at uni and what happens in the real world. And I think that if we don't somehow manage to connect the two, you're going to just hit burnout, you're going to hit stress and overwhelm really, really quickly because you haven't been prepared for the journey that's actually ahead of you.
Oh gosh, yeah. And like my colleges that I went to, like they really were emphasizing like, oh yeah, make the materials, like really have it individualized for the kid, like all your note-taking stuff, like come up with it on your own. And I'm like, how easy would it have been? Like, I mean, yes, it's great. Like, I do need creativity within the profession, so thank you. But also, I can be creative in other ways. Like, even if they were to give you, like, here's one game that you might find at Goodwill, like, how can you play this game with these 7 clients? They have different goals, they have different targets. Like, how can you do that? And I think that would be so much more beneficial than going through and being like, oh, you have to create a bingo game for this kid because he really likes bingo and he likes Paw Patrol. So you have to make sure it's 100% personalized. Where I'm like, if someone has time for that, like, let me know. Like, what is your secret?
Just doesn't work. I remember when I was in my second role, working at the school, and one of the things I had to do was provide PD for teachers. And in one of the PDs, I actually said to the teachers, go out into the playground. I want you to just collect anything that is out there that you can find and show me how you're going to run a lesson using those resources.
That's
and that was a
amazing.
really interesting activity to do because I really believe and I think teachers need to be able to do the same. We need to be able to do that. We need to be able to run a lesson or a session with paper and pen. We need to be able to run a session with whatever is in the room. We need to be able to go into children's homes, for example, and be able to use the toys that they have rather than us needing to bring a whole heap of toys and then leaving parts of the toys behind because, like, place is a mess and we've got to pack up and we've got to race out, right? So I really believe that. I think you have to be able to do a lot with a little, and I think that's the skill that really does make therapy so much easier when you're not so focused on the activity and you're just so much more focused on the goal and the child and the parent, but you feel very comfortable to use whatever is around you to achieve those goals. And I think that's a real skill. And that's a skill that I think we all need to develop.
Oh, for sure. And people can put down good money for all of these, like, speech specific toys, or like there's so many things out there like geared towards speech therapists of like, oh, if you want help with like your CHs, like this is the game to get. It's $300, but you have to like, and it's like people can't afford that when we can, like you said, go outside. Like I had a kid when I was in the schools, I could not get him to focus on like anything. I was trying like memory with articulation cards, we were trying board games, we were trying books and art and all these things, and he would not budge. And the one thing that like got to him was I Spy. And he was working the R sound. So we would go outside and I'd be like, okay, look around you. What do you see around here that has like your target sound, your R sound? And we're going to make a list. So we'd go out and we'd get like 15 words and we'd practice those words. And he would just love it. He's like, oh, can I find another one? I was like, of course. Like, we have 2 minutes. So you have 2 minutes worth of time to find another one. But we'll continue it next session. We'll come back out here and find more things. And Like, I'm like, I didn't even need
Yeah.
anything besides like my paper and pencil for data taking, because he was
Yeah.
just looking. He'd be like, sky, and I was like, does that have your R sound? He's like, nah. And it was super cute. He was great. But yeah, it was one of those things where I'm like, everything that people spent money to get didn't work for this kid. And just to go outside and be like, I think in school, that's really important too, to kind of get out of that environment and be like, okay, you're in the school building all day, like except for recess or maybe gym or something, and to be able to go out and do something new and be like, oh, in speech, like we get to go to the playground. Like, I think that's super
100%.
important for them and for us.
That's exactly it. And I think as speech pathologists, we do feel like we have to be in a contained space. We might need to be at the table or on the floor. And I think we
Mm-hmm.
need to start thinking about space in a different way. So I was talking to a mentee about this, and she had a kiddo that really liked to move. And I said to her, well, you're at school. Why don't you get him into the playground? He gets the playground, entire playground to himself. Like, that's
Yeah.
huge for a kid, right? They get the whole
Mm-hmm.
space to themselves. They get to be in the playground while all the other kids are in the classroom. That's huge as well.
Yep.
And you can get him moving and playing and still achieving your goals, because we can be really flexible in how those goals are, like the activity that we're using to drive the goals. But again, I think
Mm-hmm.
when we're doing our practice, we are in these enclosed spaces. We're in clinic rooms and we're in classrooms. And so we don't always give ourselves permission, because we sometimes need to be given that permission to be told, yes, you can go outside. You can do
Mm-hmm.
sessions in the park. I've done so many sessions in parks, where I remember having a kiddo who really struggled in the clinic space. So, but he was safe at a park. So,
Mm-hmm.
we'd come in, they'd meet me in the reception area and we'd go for a walk to the park, which would really help him with the transition. And then we would do the session in the park, and then we would walk back to the clinic, and I'd say
Yeah.
goodbye to them. And that worked really, really well for him,
Mm-hmm.
until we got to like winter or magpie season
Yep.
or any of the other things that happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that we can kind of look at our spaces differently, and I think our resources differently. And just in terms of what you were saying, Natalie, about buying all the resources, I think
Mm-hmm.
also in terms of Instagram, like we're all on Instagram, we're all on TikTok, we're all on social media, and we see all the resources everybody's using, and there's that
Yeah.
FOMO, and we're like, oh, we need that thing so that we can do that as well as that other person. And we've got to realize that, the thing that we can do really well is all within us.
Mm-hmm.
The activity or the resource is just an added bonus, really.
Oh gosh, yeah. And I think we sometimes think of kids as being more complicated than they are. Like sometimes they, most of the time, they're very simple. Like if you just
Mm.
put something simple in front of them, like, and you're excited about it, they're excited about it.
100%. And you hide a piece, or they have to go and find it, like a
Mm-hmm.
scavenger hunt, and you add a bit of novelty, they get super interested. And the other thing that I find, and I don't know if you found this as well, is that you might be sick of a game because you've played it with multiple kiddos in that week, but you've got a kiddo who just wants to play that game every single week because that's the only time that they get to play it. And then you've got to think,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's right. So it's only 10 or 20 minutes in their entire week that they get to play this game. Of
Yeah.
course, they want to do it 5 weeks in a row or 10 weeks in a row, right?
Yeah.
But we feel really bad because we're like, we're not, they don't want to play with anything else, and we're doing the same thing over and over again, but we're not. We're targeting different goals, or we're increasing and decreasing
Mm-hmm.
through the hierarchy. But yeah, kids love same. They love routine. There's
They
a real
do.
safety in it for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had back when I was in school, I had a kindergartner that
Mm,
he was very shy, like would not talk the first couple sessions. Like you really had to like go out on a limb to get anything out of him. And I did memory one day. So just, yeah, took the articulation cards, flipped them upside down. I'm like, let's make matches. And we did that. And every time I saw him in the like hallways after that,
yeah.
he'd come up and be like, Miss Natalie, like, can I come play matching? Or memory,
Oh,
I can't remember what I called it with him. But I was like, I'm sorry, like you're going to lunch, but I'll see you next week. Like, and that was just the most exciting thing to him. Like you said, like it was very repetitive. We did it every week, but that was the one time that week he got to do it. And for me, it was nice because I had a session planned. I knew he was going to like it. Like, maybe pick different words and we call it good. Like,
yeah, this is it, right? I think we put so much pressure on ourselves to make everything so, so much fun and so different. And also, I think sometimes we want to impress the parent and show them, all the things that we've got and all the things that we can do.
Yeah.
But for the kiddos, I think a lot of same. Like they want to know that they can go into the cupboard and get that game, or they've got their three favorite games, and they can cycle through that. And I think once you can give into that and run with it, it certainly makes therapy session planning so much easier. Right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
That is
the dream. You're like, I've got that one.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously we'll go into it more later too, of just like burnout for therapists, but it's like that helps with our burnout too, because we aren't so focused. Like you said, in college, like we had to sit and plan out the whole sessions and do new activities to show that we can like be creative and pull all these things in, when it's like, yeah, do the same thing every week. If the kid's enjoying it and they're requesting it, like, you want them to enjoy their time there. Like, they're
absolutely
gonna do a whole lot better, and you're gonna see so much more improvement if they're willing to come and they're willing to participate.
100%. Absolutely, and there's something really exciting for them that they really enjoy. And I think they also feel very heard and very seen when you can just relax into that. So when you've got a kiddo, I remember I've got this dog game that the kids absolutely love, and they just want to play it every single session. And when I go, not a problem, and they can also autonomously go in and grab it out of the cupboard, and they can set it up and they can do all the things. They feel really heard and really seen, and that helps you build that rapport and trust with the kiddo as well, because they get to do the thing that they want to do, and then you can get them to do the thing that you need them to do.
Yeah.
And it makes it so much easier. Also for the parents as well. 100%. They're like, oh, you get my child. It's such a simple thing, right? But the parent, it's so important for the parents to know that the therapist gets their child, that the therapist truly understands what it is that their child needs, and just allows for that to happen.
Yeah. And I think, like we were talking a little bit before, was just like these big companies are going so much more like money forward and size. Like, I want to be the biggest and I want to be the best, that we really aren't looking at like the clients coming in. We're like, oh, yep, like BG is coming in and they're working on these schools. Like, oh, hi guys, like that kind of thing. And it was just like mind blowing to me. I took on a private patient, or a private clients. I go in their home. And the mom at the end of the session was like so relieved. She's like, oh my gosh, like, you have just been so great. Like, you've been looking at my daughter as my daughter. You aren't looking at all these other things. And she's like, I've gone to therapists that are saying that her hearing loss isn't impacting anything with her speech, and that we don't need to worry about that. Well, and I'm like, interesting. Like, we'll target that later. But I'm like, my opinion, like, yes, when she gets tubes in 2 weeks, that's going to be a big difference. Like, and I'm here to support you in that. And I'm going to work with you through it and give you those resources to help. And she was like, thank you so much. Like, everywhere else, it just seems like she's another number, and she's, oh, is it 2 standard deviations? Like, that kind of thing. And I'm like, that's why I'm private pay. Like, I don't want to have insurance be like, you can see these people or you can't see these people, or you can see them but only once a month. Like, I'm like, that's not what I want to do. I want to really build a clientele where it's like, we are a team. We are working together, and hopefully while we're working together, we can get your child out of here faster than if they're coming like once a month for 3 years.
100%.
Like,
Absolutely. And I think that collaboration piece is a really big one, because I think that's where you make the biggest change. And there are sessions, Natalie, that I do. So I work predominantly with children who are autistic, who have ADHD, and who are picky eaters. So that's my kind of jam at the moment. And so for a lot of my sessions, it is me and the parent. And sometimes I do very little with the kiddo. I had one come in yesterday in swimming lessons at the moment, and he is just shattered. Like, he is so tired. And so, he'll have something to eat, and then he'll get on the iPad and he'll just have a bit of a chill out time. And I will spend the entire session supporting mum about how to support him at home, and how to look at what our food therapy plan is going to be for the next 3 to 4 months, and what's our transition plan for him for the next end of the year. And just sitting and collaborating with parents. I think that's the other thing, that as speechies, I know here in Australia, like, a lot of speechies are feeling that you've got this, 30 minutes with a client, or the 45 minutes with a client, or the hour with a client, however long you've got, and you've just got to focus on the client. But sometimes you're not going to make as much impact with the client as you are going to be with the parent. And if you can help the parent, support the parent, so that the parent can support their child 24/7 at home when you're not with them, it makes such a huge difference. And again, I think it's that giving yourself permission to go, okay, this doesn't look like what it looked like in my practice. But this mum, just like you were saying, right, that mum needed you. That mum needed you to be collaborative with her, to help her on that journey, so that she knew exactly what was going to happen with her child. And I think I actually think that we need to do so much more parent coaching than we actually do in our sessions.
Oh, 100%.
Really support parents and educate parents and advocate. And sometimes they can't advocate for their child for whatever reason, and then we need to be the voice that advocates for their child until they are in a position that they can advocate for their child. And I think there is just so much work that we can do in that space. And we, like, yes, of course you want to work with the child, but there are going to be some situations where the kiddo comes in and it's just not the right time. It's not the right session. And I think we have to look at therapy, if we can, as a journey, not as this is this session, this is a session, and this is a session that counts. Like, it's a journey. And a lot of the kids that we see, they're really complex. So we're going to be seeing them for a while. And so it's kind of like, how are we going to make this journey as smooth as we can, and how productive and effective and as efficient as we can? And sometimes it's with the parents, sometimes it's with the child, sometimes it's with both of them. And that's, again, that flexibility piece, right?
Oh, gosh, yeah. Yeah, and even, like, kind of attached to burnout, too, of, like, with us trying to collaborate with the parents, and even in schools, when you're trying to collaborate with teachers and other therapists, and, like, trying to get everyone on the same page, like, that's what suffers, because SLPs have the burnout that they do. They have the burnout of, like, trying to provide the therapy. They're trying to see all these kids that are kind of thrown onto their plates, like, or even doing like skilled nursing facilities and having that productivity rate. Like, it's like, right now there's a location I'm at that, like, the productivity rate is hard. Like, I don't have time to sit and talk with the nurse unless I go and, like, clock out, go talk to the nurse, and go clock back in. And I was talking to another SLP here in the States, and she's like, yeah, I had some coworkers that would literally, like, clock out throughout the day so that they could get, like, their total amount of hours, but they would have that time to talk to people in between. And I'm like, that should not be a thing. Like, we only have these hours to work. Like, you should not be clocking out to conform to somebody else, and just to do it's kind of the bare minimum of our job, to collaborate with parents and teachers and nurses and staff. Like, it shouldn't be this thing that's we have to learn about. It should just be kind of that, oh, this is part of my job description, I talk to them. Like,
that's exactly it. And I think when we are working in any sort of workplace where we really have those external pressures put on us, and then we're spending a lot of our time outside of those work hours doing the job and doing the job that needs to be done, I think that we're doing a real disservice for ourselves, because then the employer looks and goes, oh, well, you know, Ish was able to do it and Natalie was able to do it, so why are you, Sally, complaining about it? So I think that we need to be kind of taking a step back and going, okay, why isn't this working? Why can't I do what I'm being asked to do? Why can't I do therapy in the way that I need to be able to do it? And then having those uncomfortable conversations with your employer to try and problem solve. So it doesn't have to be an all or nothing. It's multiple conversations to problem solve because we've got a problem. Right? And we as speechies, we are really good at solving problems. That's what we do every single day.
Yeah.
So, but I think that sometimes it becomes a bit, you know, like a hard conversation and we overthink it and we start to spiral and we're already stressed, we're already on the way to burnout, and then it just feels too hard to have that conversation, and then it becomes like an ultimatum conversation, and that's never a conversation. An ultimatum is never a conversation, right? So we want to be starting this really early on so that when you first starting to get those signs of this isn't working for me, that's the time to have the conversation, not when you're so far down the road that you're like, oh, my God, I'm really burnt out now. I'm really stressed and overwhelmed and I'm losing sleep and I'm feeling really anxious and I don't want to, you know, like I dread the thought of work. That's you don't want to get there. You definitely don't.
No. And I think like the hardest thing for me, I mean, especially just from growing up and stuff, like, and now with social media, like there's so much comparisons of like people around you. And I feel like in those situations too, like speech is compared to PT/OT. Like, oh, PT and OT get it done, no problem. Why can't speech? And that's really hard for me because then, I start to compare and I'm like, they are. Like, why am I not getting it done? But then you kind of look and I'm like, well, for one, like PT/OT is so much more like motor, like you get on, you do the bike, like the therapist is there for moral support, making sure they're safe, all of those things. But that compared to doing like a memory activity with a dementia patient where you have to like use their hand and walk through the whole process, I'm like, that's very different. I can't do a note during that time. Like an OT might be able to do while their patient is doing like a handwriting activity, like in school or something like that.
Absolutely. And don't you find also like PTs can sometimes even have 3 clients on the go within
the
hour and they can just pop in and out of those clients. So I think we have to appreciate the fact that we as speech pathologists work very differently from PTs and OTs and other allied health. So that's like in my head, like that's the first thing. We are different. Also, there is a certain personality type that a lot of speeches fall into, you know, like, and when you look at speeches, who decides to become a speech pathologist versus a PT versus an OT versus a dietitian and so on, you've got different personality types, and I think sometimes our perfectionistic nature really works against us.
Oh, right? For sure.
We are so perfectionistic and we want everything just so, and we want everything just right. And I think that just trying to overcome that is a really big one as well, to be able to go, you know what, I've done my best and it's not 100%, but I've done my best and I need to move on. Like it's done. Like 80% is done or 90% is done or 95% is done. It doesn't have to be done at 100%. But just going back to your point about comparison, I think that's a really big issue that is going to become even a bigger issue in the next few years, because I think, definitely with social media and just the way that the world is moving so fast as well, and we are so interconnected and we're constantly on our phones, that it is really hard not to compare. Yeah. And so if you're somebody who is finding that the comparison is really starting to get to you, I think it's really about stopping and acknowledging that and going, you know what, I'm really starting to fall into that comparison spiral. And then you yourself have to proactively do something to stop yourself from comparing. So if that means that you have to mute some Instagram accounts or TikTok accounts or whatever it is, wherever that comparison is coming from, you need to mute it and you need to reset yourself, because otherwise the other option is just to continue comparing yourself and continue to feel really terrible about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not going to help anybody. It's not helping you. It's not helping your clients. And it's not helping your mental health at all.
Oh, for sure. And I think there's like with SLPs, we're very type A. We like to be perfect. We like to go like with the crowd. And it's very, I mean, it's hard for us because it's like we're trying to meet all of these needs and all of this, like this image of us. And we're trying to meet that where it's like, what that is not realistic. So, like, the fact that I mean, yeah, you talk to all these therapists and they're like, oh, yeah, I bring work home and I do 3 hours worth of notes or whatever, like at home. I'm like, that's not why we're doing the job. Like, that is not, should not be part of our job description. And I mean, going in, like, it's not talked about a whole lot either. Like, obviously in school, they want you excited to go into the field. And it's very sad when I go and look at like all those Facebook groups that is like there's like a speech pathologist like around the United States one, and then I'm actually a part of one too that's like SLP transitions because they reach that point that they're like, oh my gosh, like I can't do this anymore. I didn't realize in school that this is what the job was like. And if I would have known that, I wouldn't have come into it. And then there's others that come on and they're like students and they're like, oh my gosh, like I read this article somewhere and it doesn't seem like people are happy. And it's really sad to see that because it's like we do love our job. We love the therapy part of it. We love the communicating and like connecting with people. Like that part I will do day in and day out. Like that even a little tiny note like on the session to remember what I did. That's fine. But I think once it starts getting into like the nitty-gritty of like all the expectations being put on us and all the paperwork, like, oh, you have to put the same thing in 5 different spots so all these people can see it. And I'm like, good Lord, like it's 2022. Like, haven't we gotten to a point where we have a central system? Like, where I can put all of my information in one spot and everybody gets it. Like,
yeah, do it once
what?
and it's there. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? And it goes back to that idea of, what we see at uni versus what happens in real life. There is such a disconnect. And the fact that we've got speechies leaving the profession just makes me so sad because I think, it's a really hard course to get through. Like, it is hard. It is tough. And it doesn't matter whether you are, so in Australia, you can do it as an undergrad or you could do it as a master's. So we've got the options. But it's hard either way. Whatever way you're going to do it, it's hard. And you've worked your butt off to get to graduating and to get to be a speechie, and then to leave the career in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10. It blows my mind because I'm like, why? Because I honestly believe that speech pathology, not only is it a beautiful, rewarding career, like you get to make so much impact, you literally change lives just because you rocked up to work that day, right? Like that is massive. But also it's a career that you've got so much room for movement. You can move and work in different, you can work in public, you can work in private, you can work with adults, you can work with peds, you can work across disabilities, you can work across the lifespan, you can move up through management if that's what you want to do. You can work in schools, you can work in private. Like, there is just so much scope. So if you are able to stay in the career, you can have so many kind of like renewals of your career, right? Like for me, I've gone from really loving this area of speech pathology and seeing a caseload just in that to going, okay, I'm done with that. What's the next area that I can really thrive in? Or can I move into a management position or start my own private practice or whatever it is that you want to do? There is just so much scope. So it makes me so sad that speechies are leaving or that they're entering into the profession already burnt out from uni. Like, that's scary to me. Like, what, why are students getting burnt out? Like, that's fundamentally wrong. Like, that's not how uni's supposed to be.
Oh gosh. Oh, for sure. Yeah, it is It is so amazing, like how, because I mean, I've done like full-time jobs in places, and like it's fun. It's good. Like I did early intervention, but like I would always get to the point like I wouldn't call it like burnout per se, but like early intervention. I'm like, okay, there's only so many times like I can roll a car and go beep beep before I lose my mind. Like, and it just kind of gets repetitive, and I'm like, I want to love this job and I want to be in it. So that's why like I started going more towards, yeah, seeing that kind of wide range. And I know, I mean, I'm fairly new, so it's like that's not uncommon. Like I haven't found that one niche that I'm like, yes, like that's my niche, those are my people. Um but I love it because it's like I have right now like my private client, she's a little 3-year-old, and then I have like dementia care at one facility, and then I have like swallowing at this rehab, and then I have other home health that's like middle-aged adults working on like after TBI, like working on like executive functioning and stuff like that. And I'm like that's what I love. Like I love being able to go through and just really embrace the profession for what it is. And I know sometimes it's overwhelming because we have a very broad a very broad profession. But it's like you're always learning, and like I think this is a great profession if like you have that desire to go in and learn about the different like populations that you're working with, and even disorders that come. Like I worked with a kiddo who he was one of 2 people in the world with this disorder, and I'm like, how do I even research this? I don't know. Like, it doesn't even have a name yet. Like, and, but it really tests you to see, like, okay. And I think that's one thing too. In school, I wish, like, they obviously taught us a lot, but I'm like, I wish we had more of those resources of, like, I have a question about this patient. Like, where do I go? What do I look at besides looking at my notes that came from this one textbook that's going to be out of date in 6 months? Because research is going so fast, and textbooks are going so fast. Like we're always learning these new things. And like I said, it's overwhelming. And that's kind of why I made the podcast, because I'm like, I want to keep up with these things, and I want to make sure everyone else has the ability to keep up with it too, because you never know.
And it's, you know, that point there about the fact that we're always learning, and I love like that you've made this podcast for that particular reason. I think in 2022 we've got so many options for learning as well, right? Like we can learn through podcasts, we can learn through online webinars, we can do self-paced learning, we've got access to research articles, we can Google. Like there's so many ways of getting the information. But I think again, to calm the overwhelm, it's like, how much new information can I take at any one time? And again, I think it's that if you don't understand how you work best, what allows you to work at your optimum level, how much new information can you take in before you start getting stressed and overwhelmed? How much new information can you take in before you go, okay, well, that's just way too much, and now I feel like an imposter again because there's so much I've just realised. I've got to that point where I've realised, oh my God, there's so much more that I don't know. You know, there's that little tipping point, right? Like you get a bit of information, you're like, oh, awesome, now I know what to do. And then you get too much and it's like, oh no, I have no idea what I'm doing.
It's a little tipping point. You're like, oh, too far. Take it out.
That's what it all comes down to, is just you've got to understand yourself. You've got to be able to take a step back and not self-critically, because I think we're very self-critical, but just in an objective way, just kind of go, who am I? What do I need? What works for me? How do I work best? What am I going to get triggered about? When do I get stressed? When does stress move to overwhelm? When does too much stress and overwhelm move me to burnout? What does that look like for me? What does that feel like for me? And I think that the more we can be really self-aware, the more protective we can be about the things that we need, the more that we can ask for the things that we need and feel comfortable asking for the things that we need, because we've practiced asking for the things that we've needed. Right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a real key, because I don't think unis are going to make changes very quickly. I think it's going to take a long time for universities to realise that they need to change the way that they're teaching students, and that there needs to be different types of units so that that gap between what happens at uni and happens in the workplace gets bridged. And in the meantime, I think as speechies that are working or speechies that are about to graduate and go into the workforce, I think understanding yourself and really being able to objectively look at what it is that you need is going to be key. And then going, okay, you know what, I'm starting to be doing 2 hours extra at night. That's, over the whole week. Okay, I'm monitoring that. Now it's 3 hours. That's too much. I've got to stop. Or I'm starting to do an hour extra. I need to monitor that. 2 hours. I need to stop. I need to speak to my manager about this. Like actually having those flags for yourself to go, when is this too much?
Oh, for sure.
I think that's the proactive things that we can do, because a lot of these things I think we can talk about, but a lot of it's out of our control, because the management in the jobs that we're in are going to ask us to do X, Y, and Z, and we don't always have a huge amount of control over the decisions that they make, but we have a huge amount of control over us, like ourselves individually. And then once we know what it is that we want, what works for us, then we can go back to management and go, you know what, I can do that part, but the other part that you're asking me, that's going to take me A, B, and C, and I need X, Y, and Z resources to do it, and I can't do it in the time that I've got. How can we problem solve our way through this?
Yeah. It's amazing, like, what you do, or, like, what you can do, just, like, speaking out and being like, no. Like, I cannot do that. Like, with my PRN job, like, I did have to do that, where they were like, oh, but this, and this. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but, like, I am doing my job, like, how I should be. I'm not going to skimp on notes. I don't want my name affiliated with notes that are 1 to 2 sentences long, because I have to clock out at this certain time or whatever it might be. So I was like, no, I'm not. And they were like, oh, okay, well, keep doing you. Because it's like, if we're being honest, like, they need us. Like, every business out there needs us more than we need them. Because we can easily find jobs. We can easily, I mean, maybe not easily, but, like, take on private clients if we want. Like, there's so many people that are in need of our services. And I mean, our numbers are growing, like, really quickly, which is great, and we love to see it. But then you look at these pages too of, like, the people that have hit burnout and are leaving. So it's like, how fast are we growing if, like, these people are reaching burnout 5 years into the field, like, and then going more into management of a tech company or something like that? That's just not why we went and did all those years of school. And so can you, so with burnout, like, have you, because I know you mentor a lot of people, do you see certain signs of, like, when someone is hitting burnout that, like, other SLPs and speeches should be watching out for?
Yeah, absolutely. And just before we go on to signs of burnout, one of the things that I wanted to also add was I think it's been really interesting through COVID, and you would see this too, Natalie, the number of people who had COVID, who were sick with COVID. We're in a pandemic. This is a global pandemic. People, speeches had COVID and they continue to work over telehealth. And I thought to myself, wow, that just says everything, right?
Yeah.
We're in the middle of a global pandemic. This is the most significant thing that has happened globally to this generation. And you can't even stop working while you've got COVID.
Yep.
And I think this is where we're at. And I think we really do need to have conversations about that as well, because that just blew my mind. Like, and I actually had to make that decision in my head. I haven't had COVID yet, but I was like, I don't. When I get it, because I'm assuming that it's a when, not an if.
Yeah.
When I get it will be, regardless of whether I'm asymptomatic or not, I am going to stop because I've got COVID. Do you know what I mean? Like you got to at some point and that's what I go back to. What are your flags? When are you going to stop? Because I think, that to me kind of said, wow, people aren't willing to stop. Like, and we have to stop, because when we talk about the things that lead to burnout and the signs of burnout, it's not stopping when you needed to stop.
Yes.
And that's, right, like some of the big ones. So the signs of burnout that to start looking for is, the first one is not wanting to start your work day, or not, we might not always look forward to work, but really starting to have that dread about going to work. So it might not be every single day. It might be on the Sunday when you're going to work on Monday, or it might be a particular day of the week, but you're starting to feel like, that real dread and that anxiety starting to creep in, that you're generally starting to feel unmotivated, and get to a point where not much is motivating you either. And it's not even about work now, it's in your personal life as well, and you're just not feeling motivated, that you may not want to be catching up with your friends and doing all the things that you wanted to do before. Like, you're just not you. That you're having difficulty switching off. That's a really, really big one. So you might be doing the constant scrolling on your phone, that you're not able to switch off from work, that you're not able to stop checking your emails and all the other ways that people can get hold of you for work, that you're just not switching off, and you're not having those hard boundaries around that. Your sleep starts to suffer. So you might have insomnia, you might have difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep as well. That another one I find is that when life starts to feel this way, you want to get some control back, because you feel out of control. So you might start having some controlling behaviours, maybe not at work, but maybe in your personal life, where you just start to want to have a bit more control over the things that you can control, that you become quite sensitive as well, and things that would never have bothered you start bothering you. And then also those feelings of, I'm not good enough, that, everyone else can do this better than I can. You start really comparing yourself with other people, and you just feel like, your sense of self-worth really, really suffers. Like, everyone else can do it better than me. Why am I doing this? I'm not doing a good enough job. Oh, that session didn't go as well as that should. That should have been done better. Like, you start really getting very, very tough on yourself as well.
Oh, for sure.
I think those are the ones that I think, particularly for speech pathologists, that we should be looking out for. And those should be your flags, where you start going, oh, those things are happening. What can I do right now to proactively stop myself going further down that road?
Yeah, and that really hit home to me too, because it's like those things, like, I have seen some of those things in my own life. And like I said, I'm pretty new into the profession, and I'm like, that's terrifying. So like now I have been like adjusting my like workloads, and I have been being like, I've been better at being like, no, like, I can't do this or that, because my mental health is more important to me than completing this for a business that doesn't even respect me and my profession. And it's really, really tricky to do and conquer, but I think it's also much needed, because it could be a lot worse, and there you could be going out of the field completely. And I mean, also talk about this too, of just like things that can lead to burnout could possibly be like staying with early intervention too long. And then once you make the switch to a school or to a hospital, you kind of get that fresh kick, that new start. And sometimes that's all you have to do to change.
That's exactly it. And I think one of the big ones is those boundaries. So I think that we often, especially because we are in service, right? Like the profession we've gone into is a service profession. We are trying to serve others. We're trying to solve problems, but we're trying to be of service to other people. And so it's very giving. And so we are every day practicing giving, 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 giving. So it's very hard for us, I think, to put boundaries in place because it's the opposite of giving. It's taking, right? Or it's saying no, or it's stopping. It's not got that forward momentum, so it can feel really, really hard. So I think practicing boundaries, it's starting with small boundaries and then going into more, I guess, strong boundaries is really a big one. So understanding when you're going to say no, because I think no is a really powerful word that we don't use very much as speech pathologists. And I think that we need to get better at saying no, but also kind of going, what are my boundaries? So even just little things like if it's a busy week, and a parent asks you to send an email or write a letter or, they need a report or whatever it is, to actually be able to say, I'm really sorry, but all my admin time is accounted for this week. But I can get it done for you by this date. And just being able to go, okay, I am completely overwhelmed this week and I'm not going to put another thing on my plate. And it's so easy just to say, yeah, sure, I'll get that done, because that's what feels easy in the moment. And then you hate yourself for saying that for how many days afterwards, whereas if we could just do the hard thing and just go, look, I'm really sorry, I'd love to do that for you, but this is my barrier and this is what I can do for you. I think it's starting to go, we're starting to put ourselves first. And I think once we start to do that, we start to move further and further away from burnout, because we're starting to go, this is for me to be able to be me and show up as my best self, and to be able to do the work that I absolutely love and adore to do, and to be able to make the biggest impact I can. These are the things that I need.
Yeah.
And if I get the things that I need, I can do all the things I need to do.
Oh gosh, yeah. And I think that's like a big thing too, like you said, with parents like requesting something. And what I found to be really beneficial is being very straight up and honest and being like, yep, I can't do this because I have 4 other sessions or whatever. And just like creating the new normal. Like, obviously, we want the families to know we are here for them. Like, you mean a lot to us, but also having them realize like they're not our only family. Because I think sometimes we get to that, yes, 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 of course, I'll do that. Yep, And then the parents kind of get in this mindset of like, oh, I'm the only person. Like, there's no one else. Like, I can move things around as much as I want. I can cancel as much as I want. I can call at 9 p.m. at night with a question if I want, and they're going to be readily available to answer. And it's like, that's not it.
That's not the reality.
No, but it's
and
like,
I think that's a really big point, is that, we often find, I think as speechies, that there are just lots of things that happen in our day that we are not very transparent about. And often it's because we don't want to offend, or it feels like a bit of a tricky conversation to have. But parents don't know what speech pathologists do. And we know that because we're still, in 2022, we are still an industry that people don't, or a profession that people just don't understand what it is that we do. And I had this conversation with a parent quite recently where the parent said, it was actually regarding an OT, but it was this idea of, oh, I didn't know that you actually prepared for our sessions. I just thought that we just rocked up. And I looked at her and went, no. So what usually happens, and then I just sat and explained it to her. I said, what usually happens is we see, I see you, and then I write the notes, and I prepare for next week, and then I think about you pretty much all week, because you're in my mind, and I'm if there's anything that comes up during the week that I think that's going to be really helpful for you and your child, I'm thinking about it, and I'm making notes about it, and that's how I work for you. And the parent was like, oh my goodness, I think they think of us maybe like doctors, like you rock up to your doctor and they pull up your information and they go, okay, what do you need? It's that sort of thing. And I thought to myself, my goodness, I have been doing this for a very long time, and that surprised me, that the parent that I've worked with for a long time hadn't realized that that's what I do. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think we really do need to explain to parents, like sometimes it's just a little drop in the session where you can just go, oh yeah, I saw this thing on Instagram that I thought about Billy, and I wanted to share this with you because I think this video will really help you understand more about it.
Yeah.
And it's when you do things like that, the parents are like, oh, you're thinking about me when we're not in session.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or I might say to a parent, oh, it is getting to be a really hectic week. And at the moment, my caseload's full, and it just is something that gets dropped into a conversation. So the parent then goes, wow, okay, so if Ish is full, I really can't be mucking her around, and I can't be trying to get a different time spot. So when swimming lessons when swim school wants them at whatever time, and that's going to clash with that appointment, I'm going to change to swimming lessons, not Ish's appointment. It's that.
Yeah.
And we don't have to make it into these big conversations with parents, but we just need to drop it in so that they are educated. Because if we don't educate them, who the heck is going to educate them on how we work and what we need and what our expectations are?
Oh gosh. Yeah, like I didn't even know speech was a thing until I was like looking into it at the end of high school, and I'm like, what's speech therapy? And now the amount of times too, like I'm in a dementia care facility and I'll be sitting like in the therapy space where we have everything, and they'll come in and be like, oh yep, like here's the PT and OT space, and I'm like,
hello.
And the speech therapist is sitting right here. And they're just always like, and I know it's important. Like, I don't want to put anyone down in those professions because they obviously are important as well, just as much as we are. But it's so much easier to comprehend like what they are because there's like a physical impairment. Like, it was mind blowing to me comparing like my boyfriend, he's a physical therapist, and we're going through our evaluations, and I'm like, yours is so easy. Like, like it's just like, where's your pain? How much does it hurt? Like, what caused it? Great. And I'm like, geez, Louise, I have like 15 pages I'm going through. Like, it's insane.
So different. And I think those professions also, kudos to them, they have been very good at getting out into the public and really educating the public. And I think as speechies, there's a lot of work to do. And I think we can't just leave it for Speech Pathology Week. I think it's something that we have to just keep banging on about all year, every day. And it starts with the family. Like, it starts with setting those expectations for the clients that we work with. Like, what do we expect? In terms of, even like if you're giving homework, like what do you expect in terms of homework practice? Like, the home practice, are you expecting them to get it done? Are you not expecting them to get it done? In which case, why are we giving it? I think we need to question why it is that we do what we do, and then go, okay, how am I going to educate my clients so that they know what my expectations are, and how do I educate the clients to understand how I work? Because I think if we can do that, that really helps with our stress and overwhelm as well, because they respect us. They don't muck us around. They don't change things on us, and it allows us to have these really smooth sessions as well. And so, and again, it helps us work really collaboratively with them, because if I say to a client, look, I'm really like, I have different ways of communicating with my families, but one of the things that I say to them is, look, my inbox is crazy. So if you email me, know that I've received it, but it might take me a week to get back to you. And as soon as I say something like that, the parents know that, I'm going to get back to them, but it's going to take some time, and they're not going to expect an instant response. And just such a simple thing just to drop into a conversation, but it really relieves my stress. Because I'm like, oh yeah, all my parents know I'm going to get back to that email in a hurry. Do you know what I mean? Because emails are on like the lowest list on my to-dos. Like, it's not as important to me. So I know that if they have anything that they need me to see, they're going to bring it into the session, or they're going to get it to me in a different way rather than by email. And everything that comes by email can just be slow. Because it's how many hours of our day gets taken up by emails? Like, it's crazy.
Oh, it is, because it's not even like you go on and it's like, 80 new emails, and it's like you have to go through them and be like, okay, which ones am I deleting? Okay, went through those. Now you have to go and there's 60 left. So you're going through and reading, responding, and then, I mean, props to the people that do it, but the ones that like respond right away and you're like, oh, stressed. Like,
now I'm going to do some more with it. Like,
I'm like, oh no, they're sitting here too. They know I'm sitting here. Oh
no. That's exactly it. So I think just letting parents know that, like, I keep saying parents because I work in pediatrics, but I feel like letting families know how you work, the pace at which you work, that even just like how many kids you see, like you can drop that in so that they understand that they're not the only family that you're seeing. You know, like, and sometimes you can be in a situation like in the clinic, it can be a bit easier because the parent says goodbye to you and sees that you're going to take in another kiddo. But if it's before your break or something like that, they might not see it. And if you work in schools, then they're definitely not going to see it, right? Like, because you've seen their child and you have very few conversations with parents, right? Like you might send them an email or however it is that you're working. So again, it's like, how can we get creative about how we communicate to families about what it is that we're capable of doing and what we're not capable of doing, or what are the time frames that we can work in? Like if we've got to get a report done, like because how many parents kind of like expect a report like the day after you've done the assessment?
Oh,
and
like,
no.
You always say like 1 week out, we'll get it.
Yeah, I've taken Natalie to actually giving exact dates.
Yeah.
Because I find that even if I say like it'll be ready for you in a week's time or 2 weeks' time, parents sometimes want it like at the start of the week. So now I'll give an exact date, and then if they ask, I'll say, oh yeah, remember I'm going to get it to you by the 24th.
Yeah.
And that's it. And the parents are like, oh yeah, not a problem.
24th, yep, so but I got it.
Yeah. And it's that. So also don't be afraid that if the first way that you've dropped the information hasn't stuck for the family, say it again, but just either add some information or change it so that it does stick the second time, or it will stick the third time. So don't give up just because it hasn't stuck the first time, because we're in the communication field. We've got to get really good at communicating with families about how we work, because if we don't, I think we're just adding more stress to ourselves.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I know we talked about like the signs of burnout. What would be your recommendations for individuals to kind of avoid getting to that spot? I know we kind of hit on a couple things already, like through our conversation, but is there anything we haven't talked about that you're like, oh yes, like I live and swear by this?
I think the first one for me has been just really understanding myself, understanding my triggers, so that I know a trigger for me is frustration. So when I start feeling frustrated, it all starts to go downhill really quickly. So I now kind of go, okay, I'm frustrated, let's stop and reset. Or I know that when my to-do list becomes quite overwhelming for me, like visually overwhelming, and I feel like I've got lots to do, I start losing sleep, because I'm like, I just really need to get that done. So again, it's that once you know what your triggers are, you can actually put something in place to stop that being a trigger. So for me, if I'm losing sleep because of my to-do list, I literally go into my calendar and I start putting my to-do list into my calendar, so I know when I'm going to get it done, and then I can just forget about it. So again, it's that real self-awareness, because when you're self-aware and you know what's happening in your body and how, because it's often the feelings, it's not what's going on in our head, it's how our body is feeling and how our body holds the stress and the overwhelm. So understanding those feelings and what it feels like in your body is a really good sign that it's coming, like these issues are coming for you, rather than just waiting until your brain goes, oh, you're stressed. Because it can be quite a lag, right? And then understanding also how you work best. What's your capacity? You know, like if you, so for example, I've got mentees who maybe are given like a big chunk of admin time. Like they might be given either an entire day or half a day to do admin. But that doesn't work well for them. Like for some people, that does not work well. I know that would not work well for me, right? Like,
no.
That's if
a day of paperwork.
Hours, like, no. No, and that day does not excite me at all. So
Yeah.
then again, going, actually, I don't work well like that. How can I spread that time across so that I still get the same amount of time, but it just works better in my schedule, right? So
Mhm.
really
Yep.
understanding that for me, I could never be a mobile therapist. Like,
Yeah.
I run perpetually late for everything,
Mhm.
everything. So for me to be a mobile therapist would be hell because I would just be freaking out constantly about being late for everything. So I know that about myself. So I would never take on a role that required me to be mobile, and I would do a school visit or a home visit, but I'd only do one a day, right? And I'd be
Mhm.
based in a clinic. So it's really like really understanding how it is that you work best and playing to your strengths. Because I
Yeah.
think often we get into jobs and we're playing to our weaknesses,
Mhm.
but if we can get into the jobs that we can really play to our strengths, we can really thrive and be really, really successful in it.
Yeah.
And the next one is around mindset and boundaries. I think that's going to be really important. So, really checking into your mindset. If you're really struggling with imposter syndrome, maybe journaling and trying to figure out why you're feeling like that. If you're
Mhm.
comparing yourself to other people, who are you comparing yourself to? Because nobody's the same and nobody
Mhm.
is in the same situation. So, you might feel like they're the same because, they're the same age as you and they've graduated for as long as you have, but they're at this point in their career and you're at this point in your career.
Yeah.
But everybody's got different lives and we've got different things that have happened to us in our lives and got us
Mhm.
to where we've gotten to. So I think really starting to go, okay, like why am I comparing? And is it a jealousy or is it a inspiration? That's the
Mhm.
other thing. Like sometimes when we're comparing, it might be, hey, there is this element that we actually want for ourselves. So figure out what that element is and then figure out how to insert it into your life.
Yeah.
I think
Mhm.
that's the other way to change that comparisonitis because I think sometimes it isn't a jealousy, it's an inspiration and it can be an inspiration. So thinking
Yeah.
about how you can make it an inspiration. I think also the self-care, and when I think about self-care, I'm not thinking like day spas. What I'm thinking is the really unsexy, uncool stuff like, are we exercising? Are you
Mhm.
exercising? Are you eating well? Are
Yep.
you getting enough sleep? Are
Mhm.
you doing the things that you need to make things go smoothly for you?
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
sometimes it's I need to do meal prep so that I don't have to worry about my lunches, or I have to make sure that I do the washing on the weekend so that I don't have to worry about having
Yep.
clean clothes for the week. I have to pack
Mhm.
my bag today because it makes my Monday morning so much more smooth. Or I've got to
Yeah.
make sure that my petrol tank is filled so that I don't have to worry about running out of petrol on my way to work or on my way to
Mhm.
a client. Like it's not exciting. It's
Yeah.
really not exciting, but it's the stuff that really does make a difference.
Yeah.
And I think
Mhm.
those are the things that we can do to avoid burnout. Like those are the really proactive things that we can do to really help ourselves. Because sometimes, like we do need other people to help us, but that can be a lot harder to get. But I think we
Mhm.
can stop and help ourselves pretty quickly.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think I've definitely tried doing a lot of those things. Like I love to cook, so taking that time to just like unwind, throw on music and like cook a good meal or do even maybe like a 5-minute yoga session one day just to get my body moving versus
Yeah,
maybe another day going on a run for an hour to move your body a different way. Like I think is so
yeah,
important. And one thing I picked up, I mean, I had it as a kid and then kind of lost it in grad school, but now it's like reading. Like I do so much reading now, and it's very mellowing. And I mean, for me, I'm very like externally reinforced. Like I
yeah,
want, like I'm probably that kid that's gonna have like the little calendar up on the wall and I get gold stars and like
yeah,
that's gonna make my day. And
yeah.
like I have
But
the
you know
app.
what works for you, right? That
Mm-hmm.
because you know that that works for you, so you can make that work for you.
Yep. Oh, for sure. It's just, and it, or it's like having your to-do list like you're talking about and being able to cross it off and it's like, oh
Yeah,
my gosh, like I finished it. And
yeah,
one thing, I mean, it was a joke at the time, but it actually is really beneficial to me is like that we have a note sheet that has like the most important is this section. This is like the next one is like, yeah, this would be nice to get done today. Like it's semi important. And then the last one is like, if you don't get to it, like
Okay.
don't worry about it. And that really, I mean, it kind of puts your mind into a perspective too of like, okay, what should I be focusing on? That's what I need to do when I'm I'm most productive in the mornings. So that's going to be what I have to do first are these important things. And then the things in that last section, yeah, if I get to them that night or by the end of the day or whatever it might be, whether it's my work to-do list or my house to-do list, like, just once you get there, you don't feel that like burden of like, oh my gosh, like I didn't finish it because you got to that point of like, this didn't need to be done today. You can move it on to the next page, like, and that's okay.
Reframing success, right? I think that's a big one. Like, I think speeches in particular work in this space of failure and success.
Yeah.
So either it's success or failure. There is no in between, and I think we have to reframe success. And I love that idea about like that prioritizing your to-do list. For me, what I've done with my to-do list is I've actually made it a week to-do list. Because that way then I'm not even feeling the pressure of having to get it all done on the Monday or the Tuesday. It's like I've got an entire week to get this done. And that has just taken the pressure off me. Whereas when I was doing daily to-do lists, I was like, man, like the list just keeps growing and growing.
Then you sometimes get overwhelmed. You're like, all of this in one day? Like, oh God. Like,
I can't. So now it's like a week, but it's that. Like, I think we have to look at reframing success. Like I had somebody ask me yesterday, it was a clinic day for me, and they were like, oh, like, how was your day? And I was like, oh, felt so good. I actually got all my progress notes done, which, like, and I got my invoicing done. Like, that to me was a successful day. It seemed like not, it wasn't regarding every single client session. It was just like, overall, how am I feeling? How am I walking out of the clinic? And I'm like, I'm walking out of the clinic with my shoulders down rather than really up and tight because, like, I just feel lighter because I got through the day and it was great, and it's
100%.
that. It's like, how can you think about success and how can you feel successful rather than with the big stuff, with the little things?
Yes. Oh, that's the perfect way to end. I think that is something we need to really ingrain is like not, because I mean, there's a lot of times people are like, look at the big picture. And it's like, sometimes don't. Sometimes focus on that little corner, focus on that corner piece of your puzzle, like, and grow from there. Because if you look at the big picture, you're going to be overwhelmed, especially for us when we're very type A. We have the 14 lists going on and the spreadsheets and
all the things.
All the organizing type A stuff that we absolutely love. But I think that's like a really, really great thing that you kind of left us off with. I love it. So kind of to round us off, so we talked about an organization that you kind of wanted to chat about now as well and promote. What would that organization be that's near and dear to your heart?
Oh, I don't have quite an organization, but I wanted to kind of share some. I think we were talking about books as well. Like, what are the books that have made an impression? So I thought that I would share some books with your listeners and that might be of interest to them or that might help move the needle forward for them. And one, I mean, I'm a huge Brene Brown fan. I don't know, Natalie, you are, but
yes,
love her work. So if you've got listeners who are starting in the Brene Brown space, I was thinking Dare to Lead would be a great
very good
to start with. And then if you're having, like if you're a person that finds conversations quite tricky sometimes, or you have a hard time having those hard conversations, one of the books that I really enjoyed that really helped with this was by Kim Scott, and it's Radical Candor. And I thought that book was really good because it was really talking about what happens, what is the impact of not having these conversations. And the disservice that you're doing by not having these conversations. So I thought that one was one that really did leave a mark with me. And the other one, there's quite a few, and we might be able to add it to the show notes maybe of some other books.
Yeah.
But one that I did actually really enjoy, and I do like to do audiobooks because I like to, especially if
Mhm.
the author is the one that's reading the book out. I just love it. And the
Yeah.
one by Shonda Rhimes. So Shonda Rhimes is famous for doing like Grey's Anatomy and
Mhm.
Bridgerton and all the things. And she has a book called The Year of Saying Yes. And
Oh, okay.
she is quite the perfectionist and somebody that was saying no to a lot of things. And she had a year where she was saying yes to some really big, scary things for her. And she
Mhm.
just talked about, like how much it changed her life by being able to take that leap and to do the things that were a bit scary and all the ways that she got herself ready to do
Yeah.
those scary things as well. And I found it quite inspirational. So I thought I'd share that one with you as well.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I mean, we were talking a lot about like say no, like make sure you have that mindset. But I think too, like saying yes to some things that are scary can be just as beneficial as saying no to things that are going to overwhelm you. Like the amount of
100%.
people that, yeah, you go into like a private practice and there's so many people that are like, oh, should you be doing that? Do you know what you're getting into? Oh, I don't know about, and it's like, I'm saying yes. Like I'm going through this because I believe in it. And hopefully if I believe in it, other people will believe in it too. And that was kind of like me with this podcast. I was like, you know what? Yeah, like this is something I want
Let's
to
do it.
hear. And then I posted, and I'm like, oh, 40, 45 people are like, I want to come on. And I was like, wow, okay.
That's the thing,
Let's
isn't
one
it?
step
You've
at a
got to be
time.
so mindful of what you're saying yes to, and yes should be
Hmm.
those big opportunities, those things that are really going to grow you and challenge you and change you, but for the better,
Yeah.
right? And
Hmm.
then you say no to all the things that aren't going to do that. So
Yeah.
everything
Uh-huh.
that's the opposite of that, start saying no to, but say yes to the things that are really going to make a big impact on you and make
Yeah.
you better.
That's
And
perfect.
in the
Yeah.
meantime makes everybody else better too, right? Like it
Hmm.
impacts everybody else, but it's going to have the biggest impact on you. And I think that's a really good way of trying to decide what you say yes to and what you say no to.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Thank you so much, Ish, for coming on and chatting. Like
Pleasure.
I think like we said in the beginning, like this is such an important topic of people to not only learn about, but just start talking about. And because I
Yeah.
mean, we can go around and say, I'm stressed, I'm stressed, I'm stressed, like those little like birds on Finding Nemo, like I'm stressed. But until we get to like the ground root of like why are we stressed and what can we do about it? That's when we're gonna actually see things happen and see things change and see our career and our field move in the right direction.
Thank you so much for having
Yeah.
me and wanting to talk about like stress and burnout and overwhelm and all the things that, like us speeches like struggle with, but in the background almost
Hmm.
because we don't talk about it.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. Thank you so much, Ish. Have a good day. It's morning there.
And you have a wonderful evening.
I will. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.